Rolling in progress.
Good evening, everyone. To a beautiful, strange day of weather. And like we said, welcome to the Northwest in springtime. I'm going to pass it on to our Sergeant at Arms, Rob Tisch, to lead us through the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, Madam President. If you would all please stand and repeat along with me, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. Those on Zoom, please stand up. Oh, I'm joking.
Thank you. I have the esteemed pleasure of not only being the president tonight, but also I am serving two roles. I'm going to be the Toastmaster as well. So as a Toastmaster, I'm going to look for, there's a few changes I want to announce. The timer tonight is Dean. The awe counter will be Steve. And again, I think that is it. Is that it for changes?
Yes.
Okay. Does anyone have a joke of the day? If not, I do. I have one. Oh, you do? Okay, great. Dean, go ahead.
I'm going to date myself. I'm going to date myself a little bit and fess up that I have no idea why Facebook exists. It's a hard thing to comprehend. Yet I've noticed that a lot of people make a lot of friends on Facebook, like 500 of them. So I decided I was going to start trying out the principles of Facebook in my everyday life. So every day I walk down the street or go to the grocery store, I tell passerby what I have eaten, how I feel at the moment, what I've done the night before, what I will do later, and with whom. I give them pictures of my family, my dog, and me gardening, taking things apart in the garage, watering the lawn, standing in front of landmarks, driving around town, having lunch, doing what anybody and everybody does every day. I listen to their conversations, I give them a thumbs up, and I tell them I like them. And it's working just like Facebook. I already have 4 people following me, 2 police officers, private investigator, and a psychiatrist.
That's a good one.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Don't
Madam
forget.
President, we do have one other change.
Oh, okay.
With the table topics, I would suggest that we do 2 to 3 minute topics.
Okay.
That worked
Sounds
well.
good.
in the past.
Thank you, Dean, for that great jokes. It's true. That probably would happen.
Yep.
I also have the esteemed pleasure of introducing our general evaluator for this evening, Lloyd Smith.
Let's clap one.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Meeting.
Thank you, Barbara. This is going to be kind of a quickie, I guess, introduction here. We don't have a speaker evaluator because we do not have a speaker. However, we do have a timer. So Dean, if you would tell us what your duty is, please.
Certainly, I will be timing, I believe, just the table topics. And I have some folders. Since they're 2 to 3 minutes tonight, I will hold up a green folder at 2 minutes, a yellow folder at 2.5. And once I find my red folder, I will hold that up at 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much, Dean. Our grammarian this evening is Tim, and you gave Eric a membership form, didn't you?
I did.
Excellent. So Tim is our newest member. That's your round of applause. Okay, so Tim, what will you be doing as grammarian?
Okay, my job. Just down here.
Oh, sure.
Thank you. My job as grammarian, to the best of my understanding, is to look for poor use of language and poor use of grammar. In addition to that, I am to introduce the word of the day, and the word of the day is commensurate.
I didn't quite hear that. What is it?
Commensurate?
Oh, commensurate. Perfect.
If you don't happen to know what it means, make something up. Okay, our odd counter this evening will be Steve. So Steve, if you could describe your function, please.
My job as the odd counter is to listen to everyone speaking. We like to speak well and clean and crisp and to the point. Oftentimes when we have a momentary lapse of thought, we'll fill that void with and or and various other little filler words. I'll keep track of all of those throughout the meeting and provide you with your performance tonight and give you the opportunity to do a little housekeeping on your tongue. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. At the end of near the end of the meeting, I'll give my general evaluator's report. And right now I will turn the meeting back over to our Twistmaster, Barbara.
Usually I would next introduce our speakers for this evening, but since again, we do not have any speakers, I am going to skip all the way down to introducing our table topics master for this evening.
Thank you, Madam President. Good evening, everyone from around the world. Several years ago, my wife and I went to Bangkok, Thailand. We went to a lot of the temples, and it was truly magical to see these temples with the inlaid gold and the intricate craftsmanship. It was incredible. My first question is, what was the most magical place that you have visited in the world? I am going to ask Pat to answer that question.
Yay.
Somehow I anticipated that you'd pick on me for that one. I think the most magical place I have ever visited was the first time I ever visited Paris. I had been in love with Paris since I was a teenager. I studied French in high school. I majored in French my first 2 years of college, and I just dreamed about Paris. When I went there, I was fortunate enough to visit the Notre Dame Cathedral, the Palace of Versailles, the wonderful art museums, saw the Mona Lisa, saw the, I can't think of the Pietà, saw all of the beautiful art that was in the Louvre, walked the streets, ate at the cafes, and had a chance to speak French and not have the Parisians be snotty to me because they're very particular about how people speak French. And I was blessed with having first learned French when I was 5 years old, going to a school my parents had sent me to where they teach you French in kindergarten. The best time to learn foreign languages between 4 and 6. And so whenever my first visit to Paris and any visit I've had ever since then, I've always been treated with great graciousness because I speak good French. To see the Seine River, to see the parks, to see the Eiffel Tower, it was magic for me. And every time I go back, it continues to be magic. One of my favorite cities in the world, Paris.
Thank you, Pat. This is almost like the same question, but I'm just going to tweak it just a little bit. My wife and I took a trip to Sweden because we had connected with family that we didn't know about until about 25 years ago. It was so much fun to visit with them. Not all of them spoke English, So there was kind of a language problem, but to just connect with them for the first time, knowing that we had relatives in Sweden, and they, of course, they call us their American cousins. It was the most memorable trip that we've ever taken. I'm going to ask Barbara, what is your most memorable trip that you've taken, whether it's here or somewhere around the world? Barbara.
Thank you for that question. What is the most memorable trip I have ever taken? I have to say that I have not traveled quite a bit in my lifetime. I hope to do some more traveling after I retire. However, the most memorable trip to date has been to I'm going to say to Washington, DC. It is also a place that I didn't actually appreciate when I was there as much, but to visit Washington, DC and to see all the history firsthand, to walk the halls of the Library of Congress and see the president's personal book collection, to see the oldest Gutenberg Bible, all of that, and just being surrounded by history was incredible. I was there at a time that it wasn't busy, so we were able to do some of the tourist activities, get in and out quite quickly. However, we were also there during a time when there was high security, so it was a little bit unnerving to walk around our Capitol and see armed guards. I wasn't used to that as well. It was, the other part that was memorable about it for me, of course, was the food, picking out good restaurants before I left. Before we even went to Washington, DC to make those reservations early, but also to just, like I said, witness that history firsthand. But Washington, DC to me is not a beautiful city. I know some people would argue with me on that. I just don't think it's a beautiful city. It's just, it was very unnerving to be surrounded by all these big cement blocks. That's it to me. That's all I saw, these big cement blocks, and so much of it cordoned off, of course, for security reasons, but it just wasn't a beautiful city to me. So I will say that it's my most memorable trip.
Thank you, Barbara. In 2001, my wife and I took a 3-week vacation. We went to Scotland, England, and Ireland. The reason is it was our first international trip, and I wanted to go someplace where they spoke relatively the same language. However, we did not go to Northern Ireland, where my wife's family was from, because I didn't feel comfortable doing that. In retrospect, I wish I had. Even though I'm Protestant, I'm not Irish, so there wasn't a concern that the Catholics would come do some harm to me. Is there any place in the world that you were afraid to visit and now wish you had? Lloyd.
Thank you, Rob. No. I can't think of any place that fits that categorization. I've done most of my traveling domestically. The trick is obviously just thinking a little bit about your surroundings and being aware of your surroundings and not going into places that strike you as potentially dangerous. And as a result, nothing bad has ever happened. I do know people who have had bad things happen to them just for that reason. They lost their sense of where they were and didn't understand. There are certain situations you just don't want to be in, like, you know, in an alley in a big city in the middle of the night, that kind of thing. One of the assistant superintendents I worked for toward the end of my career was in Oakland, California, which it's a neat place, but there are large sections of that city that are not good ideas to go to because there's a lot of gang activity down there. And she and the people she was with were taking a shortcut through an alley. And a guy rode up on a bicycle and grabbed the strap of her purse. And she was wearing it correctly with the strap across her body. And the theory is that that's the way to keep the purse secure. And it was. And the guy literally yanked her off her feet. He had he grabbed hold of that strap as he was going by and flipped her upside down. She landed on her back and more or less crippled herself up for months and months and months. And she's okay now, but when I talked to her later, I said, Barb, didn't you think about this for a moment? It's like 6 p.m. Let's walk through an alley in a totally unfamiliar city that has a reputation of being potentially hazardous, at least. So I've never been in a situation anywhere in the US that I thought I was in danger, but that's because I wouldn't go into a place that I thought was dangerous. It's, enough bad things can happen to you just blindly by accident, car wrecks and that kind of thing. There's no need to seek out bad places to be.
Thanks, Lloyd. My wife and I have done a certain amount of traveling, as you could probably tell so far. We have taken a couple trips down to Mexico, but this was years ago. We enjoyed ourselves. However, given the current climate in Mexico, I'm not so inclined to go back down there ever again. Is there any place in the world where you have visited but would not go back? Steve?
I'm the guy that's known for adventure, or as other people might characterize it, lack of good sense. There's nowhere that I would really be terribly concerned about going other than to maybe South Wenatchee. I'm going to jump on that most memorable moment, and with that thought about adventure or lack of good judgment, we went to Washington, D.C. I thought it was a great place. I'll agree with you that a concrete jungle is not an attractive place to be, but we were out a ways from the center of utopia there, and we did see some of the nice countryside, and I was happy to see that it wasn't solid concrete. We live with our prejudices and our predispositions about what another region is like if we've never been there. And the East Coast to me has always been just one concrete monolith after another in my mind. Well, it's not. There's a lot of open country. While we were there, we did a little driving around and got downtown, ran around the Capitol. And a couple of people said they wanted to come back down and do the White House tour. I saw the mezzanine, the big track, and all the people there and tourists come down and they walk around that. But I was a pretty active runner right about that time, and I thought, I'm gonna come back down when you guys go and waste your time in the White House looking around, and I'm gonna run the mezzanine. And I was jogging away, going around that thing, and I got down to the Capitol, and there was a barricade at the stairs along the big concrete steps going up, and you go up, you hit a landing, and then you go up another set, and you go in the door. The barricade had been opened. Only one was moved back. So in my infinite wisdom, I figured I could tell somebody that. It occurred to me it was open. I'll just run up the steps, turn around and run back down And I'll say, I ran the steps in DC. I got to the first landing and 12 guys in dark navy colored suits with badges on there popped out of nowhere. What the bloop, bloop, bloop are you doing up here? I said, well, the barrier was open. I figured it was fine. We recommend you turn yourself around and get back. I said, you know, I'm halfway up. Can't I just finish?
We are so thankful to see Steve here in our presence and not in jail in Washington, DC.
We're dead.
Or dead.
No kidding. They did. Plenty of hard
What
there.
year was it? Do you remember what year you were there?
Oh, man.
Several years ago, my wife and I were part of a group that went to Esteli, Nicaragua to build 2 homes for single mothers. It was a small community on the wrong side of the river. And this group that I was with had built several homes in years past, and we were there to build 2 more. It was very gratifying to be able to do that. The question I have is, have you ever traveled somewhere in the world to help people less fortunate than yourself? Dean. And we need someone to time for Dean. Steve will do that.
Well, sadly, and to some extent to my regret, I have not traveled anywhere to help anyone. However, I do try to help people around here as much as I can. For example, this morning, my wife noticed that we had a small shower that was pretty violent and lots of wind, and it blew our neighbor's fence over and their horse got out. Now they're not there very much, so we immediately called them and told them the fence was down and the horse got out, and we went over and tried to get the horse back in. Well, he called some friends of his and they were able to come and help the horse because it was kind of freaked out, because when the fence fell down, it had actually hit it and hurt it. So it was bleeding and it was really skittish. Anyway, they got the horse in and got the fence back up, and I called him back and he was so appreciative and thanked me. And I did what I always do after I help somebody, is I simply go, "You're welcome, and please do something nice for somebody else someday, preferably this week." Another story is I was driving down our road here. Some guys were dead at the side of the road. All they needed was a jump from my electric car, or from my car battery. So I got my jumper cables out. I got their car started, and they wanted to give me a 6-pack of beer or something like that. And I said, no, I do that for anything. But what you can do for me is this week or next week, do something nice for somebody else. So I haven't traveled to do anything nice for anybody that I can think of, but I do nice things for people here in my very own Methow Valley.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dean. Tim, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. We often take for granted what we have here in the United States. Normal things that maybe people in other parts of the world don't have, or have very little or nothing at all. Have you ever been in a part of the world where you saw what little they had, and it reinforced the appreciation you have for what you have here?
Thank you for this topic. I actually, in 1992, I believe, spent 3 weeks in Mexico, traveling around on foot, on a bus, with people in their cars. And I got to live almost every one of the nights in somebody's house, a relative of somebody that I knew from up here in Washington. I had a lot of Hispanic friends at that time and lots of contacts. And so I went down and spent time with their families in Mexico. In preparation for this trip, I had been listening to Spanish radio, working with my tapes, reading, and I thought, I have got Spanish down. Until I got off of the airplane. At which time the taxi driver let me know that I didn't. Luckily, the very first home that I stayed in, the daughter also did not speak English, but she was interested in learning how to speak English. I had 2 English to Spanish books. She had one and I had one. And for about 3 days, we learned how to speak Spanish and English. The people that I stayed with did not have very much of anything. They were the family of more or less migrant workers in Wenatchee, farm workers. And so they were, the people that I knew were coming here to get away from the poor situation where they were at. I drank corn juice. I'm not sure just exactly what it was called, but it was actually corn that was ground on a stone with 2 stones and then warmed up. And we had tortillas that they were making on the top of a steel drum lid that had, the cover of a steel drum that was over a fire. But the thing that I got out of this was that every single place that I went, while the people had little, they were more than welcome or more than willing to share as much as they had with me. And often I witnessed them going to get some special thing to bring back for the meal that they wouldn't normally have. And that was kind of a little bit hard to take, but it was an outstanding time getting to learn about a culture that doesn't necessarily have all the stuff that we've got. Thank you.
Very good, Tim. Thank you. How's your Spanish?
Muy poquito.
Okay. I think everyone's had a question.
We got Steve up there.
Oh, hello, Steve, welcome.
Oops. Oh, he disappeared.
He disappeared,
Scared
okay,
him off.
scared him off. Would anyone like to tackle another question? Maybe one that I've already asked? Pat, would you like one of the prior questions that was asked?
Sure, pick anyone.
Well, you kind of did the one that was magical / memorable.
Mhm.
And I can't have you spin the globe, which I was going to have someone do, and then put their finger on it and then tell me something about that they would be interested in that particular part of the world. I will ask you this question. Have you ever traveled or thought about traveling to another part of the world to help people less fortunate than yourself?
I have thought about it. I haven't done it directly through a structured program, but I have traveled widely in Mexico, from border to border and coast to coast, from the northern border to as far south as San Cristobal de las Casas. As I have visited in various locations, I have become aware of the needs of people who are not as blessed as I have been. The awareness helped me to understand the great difference in social class, in economic status, and such in Mexico. And I know now it's gotten even worse. I used to think nothing of driving down into Mexico when I lived in California. I wouldn't go there now. The only way I would go to Mexico is to fly directly to where I'm going because of all of the narcos, the robbing of buses and trains and cars and all of that. And I still have some friends in Mexico. I worry about them. I worry about their safety. I wish I could personally do something about it. I wish Mexico would tidy up its government and take all those criminals out of their roles where they're empowering themselves and depriving their communities. I look at Mexico as one of it is our closest neighbor. I think we could do a lot more to help it economically, especially the people who dream and aspire to better status in life. And I don't think that we as a nation are doing as much as we could. I know there are many demands upon us at this particular time, but things could be so much better. I was involved in Sister City and we had student exchanges in Mexico. That was a real joy to be able to deal with the children who were going to school and were so excited about their own futures. But as far as going to a particular country to make a difference in terms of their quality of life, their economic status, I have not done that directly. It's not that I wouldn't want to do so, but I just haven't made that connection yet. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. We are way ahead of schedule this evening. I am out of questions.
Rob,
Yes,
how would you like a question?
okay.
Since you've clearly done a lot of traveling, where outside of the United States would you could go if you could go anywhere for any length of time to do anything you wanted to do? Why and how? Just tell us about your dream trip.
Well, thank you for that question, Dean. My dream trip would probably involve a trip to Norway. The reason is I am part Norwegian. My great-grandmother was from a small town called Alta, which is in the northern part of Norway. It is so far north that it is very likely that she was Laplander or Sami, as they're called locally. The problem we have is what little information that we currently have was destroyed by the Germans in World War II. There are no records that go back prior to 1945 in the city of Alta. We are very convinced that she was Laplander, but we have no way to prove that. I've always wanted to go up there and check it out myself. It is going to be a trip that I'm going to take at some point in time. Because Norway, like Sweden, has an attraction for me because that's where my family came from. I don't know if I have any Norwegian relatives that are still living in the area. I know my great-grandmother's maiden name, so it's very possible that I may have cousins by the last name of Strand that are still living there. There really isn't a whole lot to see in Alta, but because of that family connection, I think it would be fun to go there. And there are a couple of Laplander communities just outside of Alta, which would be really interesting to visit as well. It would also allow me to then continue my journey to explore Sweden, spend some more time with my cousins in Sweden, because I've only seen them once. They don't have quite the finances to come to see us in America, but we certainly could go see them. The problem has always been is that they insisted on paying for everything. Very gracious hosts, even though they didn't have a lot of resources to pay for the fancy food and the accommodations. But it would certainly be an experience to go back and visit them again. One of the things that I wanted to do in Sweden, which we didn't have a chance to do, is that my great-grandfather, who was an itinerant farmer, apparently had a house that is a couple hours north of Gutenberg. We didn't have a chance to go there because we didn't have enough time, but I hope to go back and combine that with a trip to Alta, Norway. That would be my dream trip. Thank you very much. Thank you for that question, Dean. At this time, I would like to turn the meeting back over to our Toastmaster / President, Barbara Walters.
Thank you. And I'm going to immediately turn it over to our general evaluator, Lloyd Smith.
Good morning.
Thank you, Barbara. Our first meeting functionary report this evening will be our timers report from Dean. How did we do, Dean?
Hey, Dean.
Well, we all did pretty good. I know that during the usual table topics, that 1 minute sometimes seems like it's very far away in time when we get hard questions. These were pretty nice, manageable questions. Pat spoke for 1 minute and 43 seconds the first time. Barbara was 2:22. Lloyd was 2:20. Steve was 3:20. In spite of the extra time, you managed to fill it up nicely. I was 2:30, I think. Tim was 3:25. Pat was 2:54 the second time, and Rob was 3:05.
Thank you, Dean.
Thanks, Dean.
What was that, Dean?
I say that concludes the timers report.
Thank you. Our second report is from our grammarian this evening, Tim.
Thank you. Well, nobody used commensurate, including myself.
They're good one though.
There were 3 things that I picked up that were maybe less than good use of grammar. One of them was to, just like I said, that's kind of like a whole bunch of filler words, it sounds like. And then another one was, you know, and then another one was gonna. Those were the only 3 ones that I picked up. So,
Very good. Thank you. Good.
Thank you, Tim. Our final meeting functionary report is from our accountant, Steve.
Yes,
I gotta come up there all the way.
Thank you. I
thought everyone did a pretty good job tonight. Lloyd, you clean as far as I got it. Rob, you have one sew. I'm just putting a little bump there, Barbara, 2 sews. Coming right along. Dean, you had 1 sew and 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 I was clean. I didn't hear one thing. And I'm sure nobody wants to contest that. Tim, 1 and so, and right here at the end, you got a well in there. I've been listening. You sounded great tonight. I was, either you've had some good upbringing or you've been paying attention real quick.
Trying to pay attention.
Pat, you had 1 and 1 and so. And Steve was clean.
Thank you, Steve. For my general evaluators report, this was a good meeting. We have obviously a short crew here. We had to make a few changes. In retrospect, it might have been better not to meet tonight, given the fact that we had so many people gone, but that's the way it goes. The meeting goes on no matter what. A couple of things I noticed. First of all, there is a temptation to turn and look at the big screen when you're talking to one of the people there. They see the back of your head if you do that because the camera is right there. Okay, so you have to make yourself look away from everybody on the screen. It's probably kind of a weird looking thing to have people, show you the back of their head when they're speaking, and it's natural to do it because after all the pictures are up there and they're big, but anyway, camera right there. The other thing that I noticed is that we're getting sloppy about control of the lectern, so it's important to hang in here until the next person gets here, and then that it's not a speaking thing so much as it is kind of a Toastmasters etiquette thing, I guess you'd say, something like that. I'm not sure, but anyway, it's easy to get casual because we all know each other so well, and we just get used to that sort of thing. The final thing I'd like to mention is something that's connected with what Rob said right at the beginning of its table topics, and that is the idea of visiting foreign countries. You may not know this, but Toastmasters is one of the only 2 organizations where if you call a member somewhere and ask for a ride, they'll be willing to do it. The other one's Alcoholics Anonymous. but I know lots of people who have traveled to different countries, different states and whatnot, and they've made a point of contacting local Toastmasters clubs. They usually get invited to a meeting. They frequently get treated to a dinner, that sort of thing. That's particularly true if you go to Asia, China and India. That's where Toastmasters is booming more than anywhere on earth. And the reason is they're trying to perfect their English for business purposes. And so if an American or any English speaking person shows up, they are very happy. So one of our former members, Joe Blazinski, not many of you know him, I don't think, but he's married to a woman from Thailand, although she's now an American citizen. But he went there to visit her family, contacted a local club, and the next thing he knew, he was their new best friend. They were having pictures taken with him and driving him around to show him the sights and everything. But anyway, something to think about. How do you find a club? On the Toastmasters.org website, if you put in the name of a city or a zip code or an address or a country or whatever, it'll pop up the clubs that are within a certain number of miles of that. So if you ever find yourself in Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia, there is a club there. One club. Used to be one in Afghanistan, but they went out of business a few years ago. I'm not sure why. But yeah. Anyway, that concludes my general evaluators report. Who am I supposed to turn it over to? The president, Barbara.
I probably just want to be playing too.
I think you can also look up your local Rotary Club.
Yeah.
As well. I'm not sure they give you a ride though. Maybe, but you get a free lunch. I am going to call for any announcements. Are there any announcements tonight?
I have one little piggyback I wanted to do on, like, when I went to president-elect training for Rotary. It just happened to be in Kyoto. And when was it? Anyway, it was in Japan, it wasn't Kyoto. That's where I went to visit. But as soon as they saw the gringo, these Japanese businessmen over there, because Rotary is primarily a lot of business oriented people. Come on over here, let me buy you a drink. This one guy wanted me to do slang sayings that we use in this country, trying to polish his communication skills.
Interesting.
Crazy thing to ask, but they glom on to Westerners really quick and just want to suck everything out of us that they can, and that helps them
Yeah,
ruin their positive culture that they.
but I was gonna say, I'm not sure I'd be.
Yeah.
But it's for business purposes, so they want to be able to socialize and whatnot, you know, the informal type of business type things. And
Learn to interact.
because English is the international language of business.
No other announcements. I am going to call the meeting to an early closure at 6:16. Thank you
Wow.
again for everybody. I will not be here next week, but I will make sure that all the technology is set up.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
So now that the meeting's over, you